Thank you for joining us. Tim and Noelle.
Hi. Thanks for having us, Kimberly.
You're welcome.
And everybody who's here. We thought today what we would do is just briefly touch on what we've gone over and then kind of put it all together. So the first session that we had together, we learned about basically counting the costs of pursuing reconciliation, like what will it cost you? And I had taught the 4 questions about how to arrive at whether or not you would like to pursue reconciliation. And then the second one that Tim led.
Then we talked about how you think about the other person that you're going to approach. So again, it was 4 steps, talking through what you want, how you can move towards what you want, then thinking, okay, who am I working with and how can I invite them to be collaborative? So those were the 4 steps we covered on the second session.
And then the third session, you also led.
Yeah, the third session, well, really Kimberly and I led, and we listened to the 4 different perspectives of justice, mercy, truth, and peace. And then we explored a question together. How would you respond to a conflict at your school, if you work at a school? And the conflict was around whether the money and resources should be used to serve all the students or whether the money and resources should be used to serve the most underserved students. And what was interesting was we invited you in groups to talk about which of the 4 responses, justice, truth, mercy, and peace, would be most helpful for that conversation. And almost unanimously, all the groups came back and said all 4 are needed for that conversation to go well.
Yeah. So today, what we're going to talk about is from chapter 6, right? Or 7?
7 and 8.
Chapter 7, about going directly. So after you've counted the costs, you've decided on what, that you'd like to pursue it, you've kind of like rolled around in your mind like different ways to pursue it. John Paul Lederach talks about going directly. And so we wanted to kind of talk about what does that look like? What posture should you have when you go directly to the person you're in conflict with that you're trying to resolve? And a simple step that you can take to help move you in the right direction. So
we're going to start with this slideshow.
Oh, let me put sharing. Sorry.
Okay. So this, in our trainings, we usually have people do a self-assessment, and you can find that from the Craybill Conflict Style Inventory. You can develop this Style Matters and kind of help you understand how you personally handle conflict. But we're not going to do all that right now, but we're going to explain the different styles of conflict and what we're encouraging you to consider when approaching someone directly. So we have this, we're going to have a graph, and basically the vertical axis, if you will, is the agenda or like the issue that you may be having a conflict over. So it could be like the, restaurant that you really want to go eat at, and you're having a nice conversation with the person you're going to go with as to which restaurant you're going to go to. And
so either you could care a lot about going to that particular restaurant, so your focus would be high on that, or you could not care a lot about which restaurant you're going to, and your focus would be low on the agenda.
Right. Yeah. So let's say it's like, I don't know, Cheesecake Factory. And maybe I care a lot about going, or maybe I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter that much. So you're either going to be high on the axis or low on the axis. Then the horizontal axis is a focus on the relationship. So let's say Tim and I are going to go out to eat. And let's say, we're in quarantine kind of right now, shelter at home, and we have 3 kids. So maybe I'm very interested in focusing on our relationship and having that time with him. Or maybe, I've been seeing him like all the time. And so maybe my focus on my relationship is like lower. It depends on, what the current situation is and the relationship you have with the person you're trying to make a decision with or in conflict with. So when you consider both the agenda and the relationship, it helps you understand what approach you would like to take as you work out the conflict or work with the other person, maybe on, I'm giving a decision-making example, but it's easy to track with. So the first thing that we can consider, if you are in this upper left-hand quadrant, I care a lot about the agenda or the item, and I care less about the relationship, because ultimately what I'm interested in is going to Cheesecake Factory more than what does Tim want and what will it do to my relationship with him if I force him to go someplace that maybe he doesn't want to go or doesn't care, So I've asserted myself as we're doing it my way, and it's called directing, or they revised it. It used to be forcing, but I guess maybe that's not very nice. So they kind of reframed it as directing. And so that's one option. Oh, I guess we got the Spanish part too. And so then let's say then I'm leaning more towards like focusing on the relationship. And I'm like, ultimately what my goal is in this is to spend time with him because I haven't had a lot of time with him. So I might say, you know what, Tim, you get to decide where we go. I propose Cheesecake Factory, but what my ultimate goal is to be with you, so you choose. Which, we say that, but sometimes do we mean that? I don't know. But anyway, so that's called harmonizing or appeasing. And you're like, yeah, I'm flexible. My relationship with you is the thing I'm
Yasmin. Join the meeting.
Not necessarily the agenda item or the thing that I'm focused, focus on. So then we have avoiding. So if you're in the bottom left-hand quadrant, you basically are avoiding both the agenda, the issue, and you're also avoiding the person. So you're avoiding the relationship and you're avoiding the agenda or the issue, and you're kind of disengaging from the conversation. And so sometimes I think when conflict either first arises, sometimes people kind of opt into that, like, nope, not going to deal with it, see you later. Or sometimes when conflict has gone on for a long time, you're like, you know what, this relationship isn't worth it to me, and that issue is not worth it to me, and so I'm just like out of here. And so avoiding, maybe if you think of it, because we don't like to say like it's absolutely wrong, but if you're looking to reconcile, avoiding is not going to get you there.
Well, and also if it's a long-term relationship, avoiding doesn't work in a long-term situation. If in that moment you're like, this is not going to work out well for either of us, avoiding is okay for that moment. But if you never return to the topic, it's going to be really hard to have a meaningful long-term relationship.
Okay, so then what about compromising? I feel like a lot of times we hear this word compromising and we're like, oh yeah, compromise is good. But ultimately what compromise is that everybody maybe gets a little of what they want, but they also get a lot of what they don't want. And so compromise is kind of like, you see, it's like in the middle. Like you're kind of improving, you're kind of working on the relationship, you kind of care about the issue at hand, but ultimately, it doesn't really get you exactly what you want. Like, it's not like the best outcome. It's like an okay outcome. And so staying in the middle is like, okay, but we're proposing it could be better. So up here, the upper right-hand quadrant, we have cooperating or collaborating. And ultimately, when we are working with people in conflict, we encourage people to be in this upper right-hand quadrant where they are focused on the relationship, they care about the relationship, they want to repair the relationship, and also we want them to care about the issue or the agenda. So we're not saying like, you know, oh, I care about the person in the relationship, so I'm just going to do whatever they want. Because ultimately then you're not getting what you think is important. You're also not saying, hey, you're going to do what I want, because then that kind of is damaging to the relationship. And you're also not just like completely removing yourself from the situation, because you're certainly not getting what you want at that point. So whenever people are coming to us to help, you know, navigate through conflict, we always try to encourage them and help them be in this place of collaboration or cooperating, so that way people can engage with the other person in a healthy way and come to the other person in a posture of, you know what, I want a relationship to improve. I want to have a good relationship with you, or at least as good as it can be. And also, I want the best outcome for this conflict and for this issue at hand. So it's a place, to me, of humility, but also of power as well, because you're coming to the other person. It's a, you know, risky situation that we've talked about. There is risk involved. And ultimately, you want what's best for both of you. You want them to walk away feeling like their issue is resolved and feeling like their relationship with you is intact and the best it can be. So it's really a healthy position for both people involved in the conflict, because if you're both approaching it from this position of wanting to what's best for both, then you can get a lot farther, you can accomplish a lot more, and you can have a really good outcome that I think you will feel really good about as well. So there's all of them. And maybe it might be helpful if you want to just take a minute and look at this graph or chart and see where you kind of naturally lean to. Because I think we kind of already know what our like default is. Like some people are like, I kind of just like want to make sure everything's okay, I harmonize, or I always need to get my way, or I kind of move away from people when conflict arises. Or maybe you're like, you know what? I know that focusing on what's important to me, what's important to them, and focusing on the relationship is important. So I already am more naturally inclined to cooperate. So.
And usually we have a preferred style, which is what the little self-inventory is for. And if anyone's interested in that, we can help you get it at a lower price because we already work with them. But the point is that you have a preferred style. So typically you would try one of these first. And you only move to the next style when the one you're trying isn't working. So when I first took this self-assessment, usually I would harmonize first. But the funny thing is, after I harmonized, then I would shift into directing. So it was really confusing for people because it'd be like, yeah, that's nice, let's do it your way. And then all of a sudden at some point when that wasn't working for me, it'd more or less be like, now we're doing it my way. So it was very confusing for people, which was so helpful about these 5 styles, because now I know up front to move towards cooperating or collaborating as quickly as possible and not send those mixed messages in that context. So everyone will have their preferred first style, their second style, their third style, fourth style, fifth style, and you generally move through your styles based on how they work for you.
Right. And so I think that for me, when I first saw this, it was very helpful because I didn't realize how many different ways there were to handle conflict, or types that people defaulted into. And so I would say that probably when I first took it, I was probably more like Tim, harmonizing first. And then I probably would go into avoiding after that. And then maybe I would eventually get to directing and then cooperating. But yeah, so when I first took it, I was kind of disappointed with myself. Like, oh, like that's how I handle conflict? Like, that's not really, I mean, I was in the peacemaking program at Fresno Pacific. So I was like, oh, that's not a very peacemaker attitude. But like all things, when you discover things about yourself that you don't like, then you have the opportunity to change them. And, but without the self-examination, then you're not able to make the changes because you don't know what you're doing, or you're not in touch with what you're doing. So the cooperating quadrant is what we're going to be asking you to think about. And as we're teaching the go directly piece, that you think of yourself in that place as you're approaching people. Because if you're approaching people with this attitude that, you know, our relationship can be restored, or at least better than what it is, and I want that for us, and also I want a good outcome on the issue, that's a very, like, you know, empowering place to be approaching the other person from. And it's also a respectful place to be approaching the other person from. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we're going through the next technique. Is there anything else you want to say?
Well, I think we should pause now for questions before we switch gears, because the next technique is on we're not gonna, it's just on a Word document. So stop.
Yeah. So if does anybody have any questions about those? What we went over? Can anybody identify with those ways of handling conflict?
Well, I definitely can. Because I used to avoiding. Now I'm more, what was the second? Harmonizing. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm at now, where before I would be like, I don't like this person's attitude, so I would basically not want to be around that person. Now I'm like, let me tell the person, you know, what it is, and let's work together to identify, you know. So that's where I'm at now. Makes sense. Instead of avoiding.
Yeah.
I'll say I was also, I am in the harmonizing piece all the time. That's kind of where I naturally go, and I didn't realize that until maybe about 2 years ago. And then when I realized that, I was disgusted with myself that, you know, I worry about the relationship so much that I'll just give up my, you know, what I want. I'll say, okay, fine, we'll do it your way. And then I usually go to avoiding because now I'm upset that I didn't get my way. And even though the relationship seems to be still intact, I'm not really being true because I'm just not happy with the way things went. So I'm learning how to not go that route and how to try to just be a little bit more assertive and get to that cooperating, collaborative, phase.
Right. Yeah, Courtney, thanks for sharing. I think that's so common. I know, like, even as a practitioner, like, I still catch myself, like, falling back into, like, you know, harmonizing and kind of just, because it's like, you know, there still is a cost, you know, sometimes when you engage and you don't just go with the flow, right? And sometimes I tell Tim this all the time. It's like, I don't know if I'm willing to pay the cost. Like, I don't know, like, if it's worth it. But you're right. When you are not engaging people in collaborative ways or cooperating ways, then yeah, you're not really giving your whole self, like, in the relationship. So that's a really great point, Courtney. Is there anybody else that wanted to share about where they see themselves in this?
I had a question. So is it common, based on for lack of a better word, the level of an intimate relationship? So say you're talking about a relationship with a family member as opposed to a work relationship. Can you find yourself flowing through these different quadrants differently based on the type of relationship it is?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, so for instance, when you do the self-assessment, they ask you to think about one conflict. And because if I do like my conflict with Tim, conflict with my children, conflict, you know, with people I work with, conflict with friends, like all of them, I definitely, you know, we kind of shift in and out of these different things depending on the type of relationship we have. I mean, for instance, like, you know, if you're working with, let's say, a boss, and you're in a conflict with a boss, obviously that relationship is much different than like a spouse. Like, probably you're not going to tell your boss everything that you're thinking about them and the conflict that you're in, because you want to keep your job. But yeah, definitely. And, you know, I think also even with, like, I'm thinking even like with my children, like, I love them very much and I want to have a good relationship with them. But you know what? I'm much more directing with them than I hope that I am with my husband or other people in my life, because that's the role that, like, we have. I mean, I'm not always, you know, so yes, I think that's a great point. It depends on the type of relationship you have. And also, I think the other side is like, how long is this relationship going to last? If you're interacting with somebody, let's say at like the grocery store, right? And something happens and you have to like resolve what has happened with them. Maybe, possibly, you will never see this person again. So maybe your relationship with them is not as important. So collaborating with them maybe is not as important to you at that time. Maybe for whatever reason, directing is more appropriate because the issue is very important to you, but the relationship is not important to you at all, because who are they and will I see them again? You know, I'm not saying you should be disrespectful, but you know what I'm saying, the issue is more important than the person and your relationship with them. Any other questions? Or
Hi, you know, I just wanted to, excuse my voice. I am having some issues over here, so hopefully you can understand me. But when I looked at the diagram and I just wanted to get your feedback, the first thing I thought of is, how do people see me? Not necessarily how I see myself. So I was wondering, like, I'm like, where do my family and friends, where would they put me at? And I feel like they will put me in directing. However, I feel like I'm cooperating because I'm directing others to compromise. So I'm just curious, like, on your insights to, is it common for people to think about where others think they are in this diagram? And thank you for sharing. It's a great visual.
Yeah, I think that's very common. I mean, I think even just like when you approach someone, maybe that you're in conflict with, or you think possibly you might be in conflict with, if you're close to them, like a family member or a spouse, usually you have a pretty good idea as to how they're going to respond to you. And so a lot of times you kind of craft the way that you're going to say it to like get the best response from them. But like in certain issues, you know, like for instance, like if Tim brings something to me certain issues, I'm probably going to be more on the directing side. I'm going to be like, nope, I want it my way. And probably that's how it's going to go down. Maybe other issues he's going to bring to me, I'm going to be more harmonizing. I think you're right in that sometimes we sometimes think of ourselves differently than how other people see us and interpret what we're doing. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think about that, Tim?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the other side of it is that every person has their own preferred 5. So it gets really confusing if you ever try to keep track of like 5 people in the room and their preferred first one, right? And then you're trying to figure out what to do about it. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say that for whatever sets of reasons, people may miscalculate intent or interest or pursuit. And if your heart is to move towards a compromise or move towards cooperation, I think you could always, or you may not, however it's organized for what's best, but because it's a regular relationship, it can always be helpful to just point that out. Like, if you think about me over the course of the last 5 years, you may notice that I'm always trying to move us towards a solution that we're all happy with. And that's what I'm looking to do again. And just kind of put that in their mind so that they're thinking about you the same way you want them to be thinking about you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think as I'm thinking a little bit about what you said, and you can totally correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm guessing is that you see a way forward that maybe the other people don't see, and so you're trying to help people like get to that point that you think will be, you know, like a compromise, like you said, or that would be a good outcome for them, but they receive it as like you pushing them or being directing, but in reality what you're doing is you have vision that maybe they don't have, and you're helping them towards it. Is that?
You're spot on. That's right.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, it's like, yeah, I could totally see how that would happen. So I think, and in that instance, I think like what Tim said, if you're able to just say, hey, look, like, I think we can work this out. I think that we can have a good outcome. Like, let's try this, or let's try that, or, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong in that. But I think if you're just able to say it out loud, that might be helpful for them to see your heart and like why you're going about it the way that you're doing that. So
I like how the diagram that you're showing, it's like spot on with going directly and what everyone is saying. And on page 97, it talks about first we must begin an internal process of awareness and dealing with your own feelings and anxiety before you approach that person. So just what our guest has spoke to, how people perceive you or may perceive as you're getting ready to approach. You may feel some anxiety because like, I already know how so-and-so is going to react. But then when you start to turn yourself towards the engagement with that other person, that's the dynamic that you work through. So it's a process, but it can be done.
Yeah, for sure.
So if there's any other questions or comments, we have a little one-pager that we're gonna look at. So these are the abbreviated steps in finding a way forward. So sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where there's confusion that causes tension. And our primary objective is to find and create a mutually agreeable solution. In order to do that, we must engage in 3 important ways. So the first important way is to create space for both perspectives to be respectfully recognized. The second important way is to have a plan on how to bring your perspective forward. And then the third one is to invite collaboration. So we've kind of created these step-by-steps. So the first step is to, like if I was saying, oh, it's time for Noelle and I to talk about something, then I would talk to Noelle. I'd say, Noelle. But the second thing that I would do is I would identify when the best time to do it is, to have that conversation is, because it may be a good time for me, but it may not be a good time for the other person. Or the conversation may take longer than either of us have in that moment. And so and people like to know what they're being invited to. People like to know, like, what's the purpose of this? So giving them a chance to opt in and then clearly articulating what that looks like. So when would be a good time for us to talk about, our relationship or this topic or these next steps that we're trying to figure out? So those are the first 3 steps. Then hopefully the person says, yes, yeah, that makes sense. And then we move to designing a statement that you have. So the other thing is it's really helpful to be clear about what you don't know. And one of the major things you don't know is their perspective. As much as we think we know someone else's perspective, and as many times as we've interacted with them and we think, oh, this is predictable, oh, this is their perspective, oh, this is where it's going to land. The truth is we don't actually know how they're thinking about it or what they want until we ask them. So to transition from, I know this happened and I know it, to I'm confused about that day when that event happened. And I'd like some more information about it. Remember, we have 3 main goals here. The first one is to create space for both perspectives. So here you are creating space for them by saying, I don't actually know your perspective on this. Would you share it with me? Once they've shared it, then creating enough space for you to say, hey, look, this is my perspective on it. And I really want you to hear what this is. So my understanding of what happened, and this matters to me because, and then.
So can I just pause for a
yeah.
moment?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I think is important is that in that upper right-hand quadrant, both parties' perspectives are being respected and being presented. And so I just want to, because I think sometimes when we think about reconciliation, we often think of, maybe us backing off from like what we get to share, that we were actually hurt or that we were actually, offended by something, and it's all about like the other person and so it's not all or not. It's not like about them, and it's not just about us. It's about both perspectives being presented and respected, and saying it in like the most respectful way.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want to do. And so these are some prompts about how you can do that. And then the last couple prompts there are to always invite collaboration. So some ideas I have, what are some ideas you have? And when you move towards an agreement, it has to be super clear with a timeline. Super, super clear and with a timeline. Because if you have a great conversation and you're like, I really shared what was on my mind, and we created enough space for them to share what was on their mind, and we even came up with a great idea, but if you thought they agreed to something that they didn't, or they thought you agreed to something that you didn't, it's going to get messy in a week or in 2 weeks when you say, hey, I thought you said you were going to do this. And they're like, I didn't. And you're like, well, I didn't, So that's why the agreement, whatever you land on, whatever the solution is, make it as clear and simple as possible with a timeline, because Otherwise, you can take a great thing and then it can still be confusing down the road. So as long as you have that energy and that momentum and you're in that space, make sure you end with a clear solution.
Yeah, and I think, you know, especially the future piece, sometimes, you know, like when we're in conflict, I mean, depending on the situation, right? Like, for instance, in like a close, like familial conflict or like with a spouse, sometimes it's not over something like an issue that needs to be resolved. Maybe it's like something someone said or the way they went about something. And I think that future piece is really important in those situations because, you know, like I'll do something and Tim will be upset with me. And I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong. Like I didn't do anything like inappropriate or whatever. But for him, he would appreciate it if I did it in a different way or said it in a different way or at a different time. And so then we have to talk about the future. Like, okay, so obviously these types of things are going to come up again. And so he would then communicate to me like, these are the ways that I would appreciate you, you know, telling me this or going about whatever it is in this way. And the same thing for me. Like sometimes he does things and I'm just like, why did you do that? Why did you do it that way? That was not helpful, or I didn't appreciate that. And so then we have to talk about the future and like what our expectations are for the future. Because yeah, they're going to come up again. It's just part of life. Conflict is part of life. But the more that we can prepare and be open and honest with the people that we're around, the better outcome we're going to have for our relationship. And like, we're going to feel a lot better about our relationships and what is happening in our life.
Yeah, so those prompts are there to help whoever wants it really accomplish those three things. Enough space for each perspective, have a plan about your perspective, and then invite collaboration.
So
any questions about that?
Okay, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to give you an opportunity to practice creating an I statement. So if you want to maybe take a picture of this, because we're going to, I think, split you up. And I want you, so we'll just give you a simple conflict. Like, let's say, I'm thinking like maybe a coworker who always talks really loud on their phone. And you can hear them and it disrupts your working, workflow. So one person will be the loud talker and the other person will be the disrupted person. So I want, when we break up, I mean, maybe it might be good for you both. Actually, maybe we'll just have them both be the disrupted person and they can just practice their I statement.
Just practice one I statement.
Yeah, let's just do that. So all of you are the disrupted person and you're going to read your I statement or come up with your I statement, and then you're going to share it with your partner and then they'll share theirs with you. So
you are working, you regularly work, and you've had this experience of what you're looking to accomplish or the space or time you had in mind is disrupted by one of your coworkers' personal phone calls that are not taken in private in any sort of way. So,
Kimberly, I think that's you now if we could split people up.
Okay, I'm going to put everyone in breakout rooms now.
And maybe if you want to stop the recording too.
Yes.
Person who may not necessarily be involved in the situation, but teaching people how to go through this process. So I was starting to say, even my kids, I'm trying to get them to, don't come to me with, I have 4 little ones. Don't come to me with your issues. Try to work it out on your, together. Try to go through this process, and then I'll come in if need be.
Awesome.
May I ask a question that I did have? On page 103, He says, I refer to a process that creates space where it is possible to engage truth. This leads us to live by the understanding that emerges from the encounter. Such a process of accountability can ultimately only be understood in community, and it necessarily draws participation from each person involved. I don't understand what that means.
Yeah. So
why community?
Yeah. So I think the main idea is that this is not an isolated thing. Reconciliation is not an isolated. You can't do it in isolation. You have to do it in relationship and community with other people. And I think, because like Tim said, like we assume we know like what everybody's thinking and the reasons why they did what they did. But until we engage with the other people, can we really know what the truth is, and that they can know really what we're doing, what our truth is. And so it has to involve all the people involved in the conflict, or even that are affected by the conflict, in order to have reconciliation.
And what came to my mind when I read that, thanks for pulling that out, is when we talked about truth, mercy, justice, and peace. And we said that line at the end where it all comes together because everyone has their truth. That was my interpretation. So at the end, we come together. When it says, how do we all work together? I forgot the last line. So that is where that community comes in, and the understanding, by understanding and seeing others' perspectives and their truths.
Yeah, because I think, a lot of times we, like Western culture is very individualistic, and we're pretty focused on, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying we as a country, we're pretty focused on ourselves, and what we think, what we think is true. And but reconciliation is no, you have to go beyond yourself to achieve reconciliation. And it's hard. It's really hard because a lot of times you may not really like what the other person has to offer, or you may be like, really? Like, that's really what you think? Or, so it's not always a clean and easy, straightforward process. I know the example we gave was pretty minor, but we're engaged in some pretty probably big conflicts that maybe has gone on for a while. But I think it's just the encouragement is that you have to engage the other person in order to achieve reconciliation.
And I would say in relation to that paragraph and the idea of accountability, such a process of accountability can ultimately only be understood in community. When you spend the time to listen to someone you've hurt, it changes the way you think about that action or that thing that was done. And when someone who's been hurt has that chance to say, hey, look, this is what that meant for me, and this is what the cost of it was. That's a healing process for the person who was hurt. And in my experience, that's the most accurate form of accountability, to actually understand what that experience was and how people were affected. So, and I think, I don't know if he's doing this on purpose, but think about how different that is from our current justice system, right? We don't involve the community, and we don't involve those who got hurt. We send people away and imagine that when they come back, everything's going to be fixed, and that's not true, and that's not the way the world works. And so I don't know if he's speaking to that.
Not in this case, but yeah.
Maybe not in this case, but in terms of accountability happening in community, that seems to make a lot more sense to me. So.
Well, I know he does mention how Christ, when he talks about the tax collector, he does mention in that last, was it the fourth step? Or the fourth step, where how Christ would commune with those individuals. He would eat at the table, and how the table referenced something more, it was like sort of like a leveling plane for everyone to sort of commune and to dialogue. So I guess I was wondering, when it talked about community, I understand hearing it from the other individual that you're involved with, but I was wondering if it is a larger context in terms of others, like having that discussion with other people, just in general, as of like a witness almost, so to speak. But then he talked about too how the church, you have to have the discernment to know when not to, project it, maybe certain things you shouldn't say into the entire church or the congregation or the community. So I wondered if in this context, maybe even from the example that you cited with breaking off into our groups, if that was talking about involving other people or just the individual that you had the quote unquote conflict with.
Yeah, so I think maybe if I can answer your question, I think the progression is, first is the go directly, right? So it's the kind of the thing that we practice, just going directly to the person that you're having a conflict. And then he progresses into take along one or two witnesses. And I think that's what that piece is in. And so in that case, I guess the community would be, like the people that are offering wisdom and counsel to the people involved. But at a certain point, I think you're right. Like, then tell it to the church. Like, depending on what the issue is and how far-reaching the conflict is. I mean, we worked with the church that there was sexual misconduct within the members of the church, and it was, far-reaching. A lot of people were affected. A lot of people were maybe not directly affected, but they're like, well, that could have been, my kid, that could have been, whatever. And so, and the trust that was broken, all these things. So like in those types of situations, yes, I think the whole community should be involved in these conversations. But once again, it's using discernment and wisdom as to who should be involved, when they should be involved. Does it even matter that they're involved, these types of things, so.
And for that person too, in what ways they're involved, are they sort of looking for a clean slate or to start in that community again? Or is the community trying to figure out, hey, this person's not taking responsibility, what do we as a community do? Right. I mean, there's so many factors. Yeah. But I think you're right. What John Paul Lederach's talking about in the second step when he says community, he just means those witnesses that are present. Because the progression is like, hey, can I just solve it with you? Yes, we solved it. Great. Hey, can I just solve it with you? No. Okay. Well, I still want to solve it.
Right.
Or
like you struggle to solve it together. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So can the four of us solve it? Then the question is, was it solved? Did the four of us really solve it? So.
Were there any other questions before we end?
All right, well, we're going to close our chapter 7 and 8. We have one chapter left. Next Thursday, we close our Reconcile book study. Wow, went so fast. Have a great evening, everyone. Be safe. Thank you, Tim and Noelle Nightingale. And that concludes this section of our Let's Talk About Culture. Have a great evening.